Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined by the one and only Wes Hodkiewicz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. Wes, it's minicamp week. It is the final week of the off-season program before the players and coaches take their summer break, and then we come back for training camp.
And the writers
will try to take a break in there somewhere, right? That's sort of the idea at some point along the way. Before we get to previewing minicamp, though, just need to touch on the bit of news from Monday at 12:65, which is that the Packers ultimately released 7-year veteran cornerback and 2-time second-team All-Pro Jaire Alexander. It had been sort of an uncertain situation all offseason long as to whether Alexander would be back or not, or traded, or what would happen. Ultimately, it sounds like Packers and Alexander's camp were not able to agree on a restructured contract. Finding a trade partner didn't exactly work out, and with this being mandatory minicamp week, it was time for a decision to be made, and that decision was made, and the Packers have moved on.
Yeah, and credit to the Packers, and honestly credit to Ja too. I don't think this thing played out that much in the media. I think there was a lot of conjecture, but not a lot of bickering back and forth or anything like that. It's two professionals, two sides that I think at the end of the day, it probably was in everybody's best interest for a fresh start. I'll be honest with you, Michael, I made this very clear on social media. I mean, this hurts my heart. I love Ja. I've really enjoyed covering him the last 6-7 years. And I will continue to say this, and you had to edit my insider inbox, but I just feel like there's, in my time covering the team, I don't think there's ever been a player that's probably been more misunderstood than Jaire Alexander. He's a good, kind-hearted individual. I mean, there's a reason why you saw so many players on this team reposting the Packers thank you graphic to Ja on their stories on Instagram, seeing people reach out. You heard Xavier McKinney and Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs, all these guys talk about him this offseason and what he means to this locker room. But here's the thing, and this is the fact of the matter. I mean, Ja's been banged up the last few years, and he's played, I believe it's 34 games since the 2020 season. The Packers had to make changes last year, losing him the second half of the year, and a lot of those changes really worked out well for this defense. When you saw what Keyshawn Nixon can do on the perimeter, when you saw Carrington Valentine getting opportunities again outside, and obviously the depth that they have at the safety position, and now bringing in Nate Hobbs. I mean, the Packers have made the necessary adjustments. You hope for Jaire's sake he can catch on somewhere, get back to the type of player I think everybody knows he can be. But this is obviously the direction the Packers have chosen to go, and I think as you move forward now into training camp here in the next 6-7 weeks, probably the best thing just to be able to have this kind of new chapter.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where the business of football, sort of gets in the way of what everybody would just like it to be all simple. Yep, and the business of football isn't simple when you're talking about injuries and high-priced contracts and the commitments and all the stuff in the CBA and it's two sides, a team and an individual player, looking out for their own best interests, and sometimes those things just don't connect, and that can be the business of the game. Yep. I personally, I really enjoyed covering Jaire Alexander as well. I had a really nice, I'll never forget this, a really nice sit-down interview with him. It was actually after his rookie season. I was doing a feature story in the Packers yearbook heading into 2019. After he was the first-round pick in 2018, and obviously impressed as a rookie, and just sitting down and talking football with the guy. But then once you start talking football with him, the conversation always ends up kind of going somewhere else, right? And it's like you get to know somebody a little bit, and I'll always remember that conversation because I learned very early on that Jaire Alexander, He's wired a little bit differently than just your average NFL player, for lack of a better phrase. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. We've seen guys wired differently who come in and out of locker rooms all the time. It's part of how things go here. And when the guy was healthy, he was a heck of a player for this team. And I hope he can get back to that level again. I hope he can find good health in his career and get back to the all-pro level player that he's been in the past. We'll see what happens in that regard. The Packers have been planning for this. This is not something that was a last-minute whimsical decision. Bringing in Nate Hobbs in the offseason. Obviously, they learned, as we've talked a lot on this show, about Keyshawn Nixon and what he proved that he could do last year. There will be a lot of eyes on Carrington Valentine now moving forward, and I think even though Valentine, wasn't a big part of this defense for the first half of last season as he was dealing with a lot of injuries and stuff, we started to see some of Carrington Valentine's best football toward the end of last season, and I think that's where he's hoping to be able to pick up where he left off as Jeff Hafley and the secondary coaches piece together exactly what the secondary is going to look like in 2025 now.
Yeah, and you know how it goes with Insider Inbox, you know how it goes with social media. The moment you move on from a player, people are always looking at what are the big veteran names, the free agents that are available. And I understand why fans go down that route, but at the same time, when those questions were posed to me, the first thing I said was, I know Carrington Valentine deserves the right to compete for a starting position, a permanent role on this defense. He's been a tremendous soldier for Green Bay the last 2 seasons. Starts 12 games his rookie years in a pinch. Last year, he ends up, as you mentioned, has the hamstring injuries, the soft tissue injuries at the beginning of the season. Kind of falls out of the rotation a little bit, was mostly just doing special teams. And then when the Jaire stuff happens again after Jacksonville, he's thrown back in the lineup, and for as much as people have talked about Ja's situation and Nate Hobbs and obviously Keyshawn Nixon and his comments about kickoff returns and him wanting to play outside cornerback, it's mind-boggling to me that a bigger topic hasn't been this offseason how Carrington Valentine really peaked at the end of last season. The interceptions that had eluded him at times during his college career at Kentucky and also early on with his time with Green Bay, he started pulling those passes down now. He is a legit playmaker, and I keep mentioning this to you, Michael. The guy's 23 years old. The Packers have players, I think, in this rookie draft class that are older than Carrington Valentine because he went out so early for the draft as a true junior. Well, now you're seeing him come into his own. And the other thing I will also mention, what I love about the way the Packers have situated this secondary, you have a guy in Nate Hobbs who right now at this point in time looks like potentially that star nickel position. Well, if an injury happens on the outside, people ask, what happens? Who do you go to? Well, Hobbs can go outside, and you got Bullard that can play inside. Right. You have these safeties that can get involved in that. It's not just about perimeter cornerback, inside cornerback, slot, nickel, dime, whatever you want to call it. It's about having a multitude of players that can play those positions. And I think that's ultimately going to be a huge strength of this defense this season.
And I think that's what we're going to be continuing to watch this week during minicamp and then obviously during training camp as well. But just how the pieces are coming together in the secondary. I think when you look at the cornerback position for the Packers right now, when you look at both outside and in the slot, it seems to me the top 4 guys, not in any particular order, are Nixon, Hobbs, Valentine, and Bullard. Bullard being a guy who plays the slot, Valentine being a guy who plays outside, Nixon and Hobbs being guys that will play be either one. So in a sense, those are your top 4 cornerbacks, even though I know officially Bullard is a safety. But those are your top 4 cornerbacks for your nickel package. And I think where this goes from here is, okay, how does the depth line up behind that? Are the Packers going to make another acquisition potentially? Where do things go with young guys like Kalin King and Kamal Hadden and a new recent signee who's got some NFL game experience in Gregory Jr., who was just brought in recently? All of that stuff, the depth behind those 4 guys is what needs to be sorted out, because you know as well as I do that we can talk all we want about those 4 guys. The chances of those 4 guys at cornerback being available for all 17 games, plus hopefully the playoffs for the Packers, are pretty slim. Yep. So you're gonna need the next guys to be stepping up behind them, and I think that's going to be. It's not only going to be an ongoing conversation this week through minicamp and also in training camp, but as the 2025 season develops, because some of those guys, like a Gregory Jr., for example, just got here, and what impression is he going to make, say, during training camp, to make a bid for the 53 as this cornerback depth sorts itself out?
For sure, Mike, and that's one thing I think is also exciting. It's a part of the uncertainty too, right? But I mean, for as much as, and Kalin King, we've heard rave reviews from him so far this offseason. Derek Ainsley, the Packers passing game coordinator, had talked a couple weeks ago about he felt he's had a really strong offseason program, but Haddon is such an interesting one too in that conversation, because he was actually a higher draft pick than King in the 2000.
Yeah, he was a 6th round
24 draft, but the Packers brought him in late at the beginning of the regular season on the practice squad. So you kind of forget these things, that Gregory Jr. was a former draft pick. These guys have credentials. These aren't just random dudes that the Packers signed. But at the same time, we know player acquisition is a 365-day thing, and there's been times where we've seen Dennis Kelly come in the week before training camp, right? I mean, they do make those signings too. So seeing what the next move is for Green Bay and how you go about handling is going to be really fascinating, and also the fact of the salary cap room that you've now cleared with Jaire Alexander. The Packers have a multitude of players from that 2022 draft class that'll be coming up for contracts here. After this season, you'll be able to work on extensions with a very promising 2023 draft class. The circle of NFL life just continues to go over and restart. So a very bright future for Green Bay, but it was wild to me too. I'll close on this. When we talked about Green Bay, going all in or whatever in 21 and all this thing, and now Green Bay's at a position where they have so much cap room to play with as well. Again, a lot of different things that Brian Gutekunst and this personnel department can do.
Yeah. Well, what else are you going to be watching for here during the 3 days of minicamp? Just to recap for the fans, minicamp as of now scheduled for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week, and this will wrap up the off-season program. After this, it's like the last day of school for the players. They head out on their summer break, and then they will report back. I believe it's July 22 for training camp, with the first practice scheduled for July 23. I know, we've seen the cross training going on with the offensive line. We've seen, all sorts of different guys getting reps at wide receiver with Jordan Love with the number one offense. What are the kinds of things you'll be looking for on the practice field this week?
I can't wait to see. Obviously, most of these guys will be in, have already been here. So we've seen some of these matchups already. But, if you watch that, I don't know if you got a chance to check out, or if people have had a chance to check out the Mic'd Up segment that our video department put together of Matt LaFleur from last week. He had a speech for the guys at the end of practice where he was talking about asking the veterans, directing this at the young guys, what's it going to be like out here once training comes around? It's going to be hotter. The competition is going to be fiercer. Everything ramps up. This is the final notch here the final warm-up, if you will, before, jobs and positions and things are going to start to get decided. You're no longer just going to be locked into one role. They're going to start figuring out, okay, who fits best where, and what is that depth chart going to potentially look like? So from that perspective, this receiving core is going to continue to be probably the biggest, I think, highlight of watching these practices. We saw it again last week, and Matt LaFleur again talked about it. Every offseason, it seems like I mention how Romeo Doubs is the most consistent practice performer I think I've seen outside of Jordy Nelson during my time covering the Packers. He is just, he doesn't drop passes. He's wherever he needs to be. If you're doing a 2-minute drive at the number one offense, I guarantee you he's getting that ball 3 times. It's just the way it always seems to work out. Yeah. And Doubs is back to that again. He's put the concussion injury and those type of things behind him, and now trying to play and get ready for, again, as we've talked about, a huge year 4 for him. Matthew Golden, we saw the fast twitch muscle fiber in practice, and he's not going to be the biggest receiver on the field, but by golly, this guy finds ways to get open, and you can just see when he puts his foot in the dirt how quickly he can get upfield. This is going to be a tremendous competition, and you've written about it, and we all talked about it. This is probably going to be one of the hardest years Green Bay's had, figuring out what their 53-man roster is going to be like based on what this offseason 90-man roster has been. And I think from that aspect of it, it's really exciting. So, this is your last chance to make a final impression here before we get to training camp, and everything really truly does shift into that final gear. Yeah,
it's interesting. I've been asked in Insider Inbox about, is this the deepest Packers team that you've ever covered? And I wasn't quite sure how to answer that, but I answered it by saying, at least in recent memory, this feels like one of the deepest 90-man rosters as far as the off-season roster. that I can recall. But I don't like to say things like this is the deepest Packers team, because for one, you can't keep everybody. You've got to narrow this down to 53 at the end of August, beginning of September. And between now and then, there is going to be stuff that happens. And what I mean by stuff is guys are going to get hurt. Though, if injuries happen in training camp or the preseason games, that's going to impact how the 53 shapes up, and then what you're going into week one with, and all of that. So, I really like this 90-man roster that Brian Gutekunst and his personnel department have put together this summer. But 90 getting cut down to 53, that's 37 guys. Now a whole bunch of those guys will be brought back on the practice squad, and the practice squad is 16 players now, which is double the size of what it was a handful of years ago. But still, how that 53 shakes out, and I think I said it on one of our shows earlier, I think the Packers are going to be potentially releasing a lot more experienced NFL players potentially than they have in years past, because the competition for that 53 is going to be so tough, and the personnel department has done such a good job in recent drafts that that even if they see a draft pick that maybe isn't going to play right away, they don't want to just let that guy go. They want that guy to be on the 53 to continue to develop and see where he is toward the end of his rookie year, or see where he is in his second year. And if you believe in a player like that, you don't want to just release him and cross your fingers that you get him back on the practice squad, because as soon as you release him, he's available to anybody, and you don't know who might snatch him up. And anybody who is on the practice squad is essentially a free agent. They can go sign wherever they want to if somebody comes along and offers them. So all of those roster machinations have to get sorted out at the end of training camp before we really get a feel for, okay, exactly how deep is this Packers team? How did the depth sort itself out when you have to make the tough decisions? And those are a ways away.
And you hit the nail on the head there with, when you look at the 22, 23, 24 draft classes, I personally think, we talk so much about Ron Wolf, and he traded for Brett Favre, and he signed Reggie White, and that was so exciting. People so oftentimes overlook the fact that those early 90s drafts, the amount of capable players that built those Super Bowl teams, how many of those came in 92, 93, 94, 95?
Yep.
This is what it feels like right now with what Green Bay's done with these recent draft classes. You had 22, which I think pound for pound is going to end up being one of the best ones of the 21st century. When you think about the Zach Toms, finding them on day 3, right?
Yeah.
A guy that could potentially end up being an all-pro right tackle. When you think about the playmakers, Tucker Kraft in the 3rd round in 2023. And then 2024, the Packers might have gotten the best one of all of them, with Edgerrin Cooper potentially, with the potential he showed early on and where he could potentially go. That's how you build a championship team. I challenge people with this all the time. I mean, you see the Kansas City, you see Philadelphia get to the Super Bowl. How did they do that? It's Patrick Mahomes, it's Jalen Hurts. Look at those recent draft classes for the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, they hit it out of the park with their drafts recently. If a team makes it that far, if you look at their last 2 or 3 drafts, chances are there were some pretty talented football players that came out of it. And I feel like that's where Green Bay's at right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. One other topic I want to hit on before we go and hit the practice field ourselves for watching minicamp here. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. All right, a lot of content up on Packers.com. You posted a story yesterday on Zach Tom, the right tackle heading into a big year 4. We talked about Tom a lot on a previous show. A story that you posted last week that we didn't actually get a chance to address too much. Another offensive lineman, and it's the newcomer at left guard, Aaron Banks, the free agent signing from the San Francisco 49ers. Certainly an understated fella.
Yeah.
His first meeting with the media was nothing gregarious. There were no headlines necessarily coming from the comments, but The one thing that you gleaned, and certainly I did as well, is this is a guy that, he had a lot of success with the 49ers, but that 49ers team was always just so close and just couldn't quite finish the deal. And he feels pretty good about coming to this team, which maybe hasn't gotten as close as the 49ers, but is still a team on the rise and is possibly going to get the same kind of shot or shots that the 49ers have had. His drive, his desire to win a Super Bowl is one of the biggest reasons he's here.
This guy, man, it was until he said it that I finally went back and looked at what the 49ers statistics were and what their records looked like the last 4 years.
Yeah.
I wrote it in the story. I mean, Aaron Banks came as close as you can get to winning a Super Bowl ring without doing it.
Yep.
2 NFC Championship game appearances right away. You forget about that. I forget about that. Maybe you didn't, but I forget about, because we focus so much on what happened and the Super Bowl and kind of losing that late and then the overtime and everything. You forget that the 2 years before that, they had lost in the NFC Championship game. And then last year, they're hoping to, we're going to close the door now. Yes, we didn't get it done, but we got another shot at this thing, and you saw how the Christian McCaffrey injury, the injuries that followed that sort of knocked that train off the tracks. And the 49ers, that was a tough way to do this thing. So, yeah, Aaron Banks, obviously, you're an unrestricted free agent. You want to take care of your family. You want to get paid. But he also didn't want to get too far away from where he'd already been in terms of being a competitive, winning organization and culture. I think sometimes fans get so wrapped up on, these guys are making all this money. These guys do this every single day, Mike. You and I see them walk in this building every single day. The hours they have to invest here and both at home, taking care of themselves, training, all that. It is a nonstop job now. You don't want to do that job and then come out with 3 wins a season. You want to compete for that championship. And that's where Banks feels like he is. That's where he feels like this place has brought him to. In addition to the fact, 6'5", 325 pounds, the Green Bay Packers, as they've started to meld their offensive line, this is the direction this thing is going. This is a power football team with Josh Jacobs behind the controls, right? I mean, they want to be able to run the ball directly at your face and go through you to the end zone. Banks is one of those guys that can help them do that. In addition to the fact he's pretty darn athletic for a guy his size. This is a former second-round pick in 2021. I mean, this is a guy that came in with major credentials from Notre Dame. So now coming into his own, 27 years old, and kind of building himself up into this player that he's become, the Packers feel like this guy could be the missing piece. And certainly he's motivated to maximize on that opportunity.
Yeah, one really interesting statistic that I found on Aaron Banks back when the Packers signed him, and I had kind of forgotten about it and then was reminded of it. I was just looking it up the other day. He basically started the last 3 seasons, other than missing a couple games here and there with minor injuries. He started the last 3 full seasons at left guard for the 49ers. That first year he was a starter at left guard, he was flagged for holding 5 times. The last 2 seasons combined, he was flagged for holding 3 times.
Yeah.
This is a guy who he got his opportunity, took a few lumps, had to learn some things along the way, and has developed into a polished pro whom the Packers believe, as they always do when they make this type of investment in a guy coming off of a rookie contract, the Packers believe that he hasn't played his best football yet, that there's still another step forward for this guy, and that could potentially be a really big step, because this guy is an awfully big man, and he's going to have a presence in both the run game and the pass game as the left guard for this team.
I'm glad you brought up the penalized thing too, because it's the same thing with Nate Hobbs, where Hobbs played a physical nickel position in Vegas, had 1 accepted penalty, I think, last season for defensive holding. I mean, this is a guy that plays within his fundamentals, and that's what this comes down to, particularly when you look at the offensive line like that. When somebody has that few penalties, it tells you 2 things. 1, he's not getting beaten. And 2, his technique and his fundamentals are where they need to be. Because there is that old adage about, hey, offensive linemen are holding on every single play, but are you staying within the framework of the body? Are you making sure that if a player gets a move on you, you're not getting to that outside shoulder, right? That's where Banks has excelled. And when you see him physically, it makes sense. I mean, this guy is a road grading type interior offensive lineman. Now, we have to see everything that plays out here with Elton Jenkins and potentially him at the center position. Obviously, we've seen Sean Ryan taking snaps there while also being in that competition for for right guard. Jacob Monk has gotten some important reps inside and at the center position during this camp, and then certainly figuring out how everything's going to shuffle out the left tackle position with Jordan Morgan potentially being incorporated into that. What is the point I'm trying to make with all that? Green Bay has options. And in addition to the fact that now you have a linchpin, a guy that you can build around at left guard, there's a lot more flexibility that Green Bay can do there. That was one of the drawbacks of where they were at with Elton Jenkins, is that if they had to move him, if there was an injury there, who's stepping in for him at left guard?
Yeah.
Now you have a guy like Banks that has that position, has that experience, has done it at a high level, has played in those big games, and also still having that versatility with a Jenkins, with a Tom, with a Sean Ryan, guys that can move around a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got to head out to the practice field, catch what we can of minicamp, so we will call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team and this week's minicamp on Packers.com. We will have one more unscripted show for you later this week before we take a break from these chairs and then come back for training camp. So for Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.